Welcome to day 2 of the Veterinary Odyssey. Today is going to be focused on chimpanzee health, habituation, and all the realities of conservation. And just knowing that we were going to be getting into that today was the biggest plus to me. It made me super duper excited about knowing what we were going to be getting into. And now we're actually going to be able to get hands on today. So let's get to it. Now, we had an early start in the morning, like around 7 a.m., and we had to take a super duper long drive. But just like I was saying before, all the traveling does give time for reflection, so I did enjoy that aspect of it. I feel like everybody's adrenaline honestly was pumping because we were going to be transitioning from the travel side to the medicine side of it all. But on top of that, though, our drive to Lekedi National Park was very eye opening about the country and everything that's going on within it. There's a very limited development, and especially when you enter into the center of the country and you go to the different national parks, just because the nature is so protected. But there's things like mining, there's manganese, oil, and there's a ton of things that are going on with foreign countries that are trying to mine and invest in Gabon. But with that, of course, comes a lot of different things. Like there are roads specifically just for workers from foreign countries that have come to mine or do some sort of work in the country that the local people can't use, that we couldn't even have used, which is very interesting to think about, honestly, because it brings up the question of who is actually going to be benefiting long term from all this and whose interests are really first in their mind. But nonetheless, we ended up getting to the national park and we had to start prepping everything from the equipment to the protocol and everything because we were going to have to anesthetize the chimps. We were going to have to get blood, do ultrasounds, do some work in the lab, a whole load of different things just to do these health checks on these chimps. And one of the big reasons we were doing this is because the chimpanzees have parasites, lots of them in their intestines from just being in the environment that they are, and all the parasites and other things are leading to a bunch of different cysts, whether it's on their liver, on their uterus, or on their stomach, just in a whole bunch of different places. But we need to be able to do some health checks on them and do a lot of different lab work as well to be able to help them out. We used a mix of ketamine and dexmedetomidine to induce them, I believe, and the reversal, I think, was atipamezole. But what made it really effective and smooth was the fact that a lot of the local people that worked at the national park had absolutely insane relationships with the chimps, so it made it super duper easy and low stress. The workers were really the ones that were able to make this all happen because no matter what you do, the chimps are wild animals at the end of the day, even though they are rescued. So they do have that innate response, and you don't know what could happen. So just to make sure everybody was safe, we got to make sure that we're respecting the animal in its space, especially when all of this is going down. But as I was saying, when I saw the relationship between the keepers, the vets, and the chimps, it all made me rethink how I saw animal care. Because even with wild animals, mind you, these chimpanzees are all rescues, but just the relationship between all the different parties that are there day in and day out made the process so much easier. And I feel like that's something that's beautiful to see when it comes to the world of wildlife and conservation, since it's much harder to do, and there's also an added layer of danger with it as well. The fact that there's a sort of familiarity between everybody, not even sort of, just a familiarity between everybody, it reduces the stress because you're able to build up the trust over years and years of time. So everybody has that trust for each other, and the process is able to go much smoother. Now, getting into everything clinically, I don't even know how to fully describe it or truly convey my emotions, but it was just so insane to go from always doing medicine on dogs, cats, horses, cows, or even just like other wild animals, whether it's a buffalo or an elephant that I've worked with. All of them are shaped so differently. They look different from us. They do everything different from us humans. But being face to face with a chimpanzee, y'all, like being able to look at their face, look at their body composition, hold their hands, everything, they are so much like us that it is absolutely mind boggling. And at least for me, it made me take a step back. When we examined the chimps, we were able to notice a ton of different things as well. We were looking at stuff like their trauma, infection, environmental factors, seeing if they were scars, whether some of them had digits missing, some of them had scratches, or pretty much anything of that nature, or maybe even just bloating in their intestines while we were palpating them. But while we were doing all this, we had to document absolutely everything because, especially in the world of conservation and dealing with wild animals, where the research is very, very limited and there's limited knowledge on different medical procedures, it's not only very beneficial to be able to tailor care to each specific and individual animal, but also to have data to then be able to pull back out and research in the future, as well as share within the network, whether it's a zoo network, whether it's a national park network, pretty much anything. But we ended up doing all our health checks. We were doing ultrasounds, found some cysts, found some parasites like we expected. And the next thing that we had to do was draw some blood. When it comes to conservation, especially in great apes, prevention is one of the biggest things. And it matters just as much as treatment. Some of the things that we were drawing blood for were to do blood smears, be able to look at all the different blood cells, whether it's the red blood cells or white blood cells for immune function, as well as tests for tuberculosis and leukemia, and also blood type to chimps, which interestingly enough, chimps only have type A or type O blood. They don't have type B like us, which is pretty interesting. And for the tuberculosis testing, for us, I believe they put it in our arm and measure the reaction size. But for chimpanzees, since they can get two different strains, they put the avian or bird strain of tuberculosis in the left eyelid and then the bovine or cow strain in the right eyelid and then see the sensitivity reaction. And that's how we're able to see if they've been exposed to tuberculosis or not, which is pretty cool. But luckily, they were not. Um, but one of the most amazing stories that I had heard about during our trip was this baby chimpanzee that was rescued by Antonio, who was our group leader. He founded a company called Gabon Untouched, which is focused on ecotourism in pretty much in and throughout the entire country, as well as conservation. Now, long story short, there was a time where he was simply just going home and he saw somebody carrying a bag and there was a hand sticking out of the bag. But him being him, he noticed it looked like a chimpanzee's hand. And all Antonio is about is conservation and animal welfare. So he went over to the person and had a conversation with them. And he found out that the baby chimp is probably a rescue and its mother had probably been killed for bushmeat. The baby chimp was probably just a couple of years old. It was super small. The growth was stunted, probably due to the malnutrition, but that led to a whole bunch of developmental consequences. And the fact that it was so severely malnourished meant that it had a low probability of surviving. But nonetheless, Antonio eventually got it from that person and was able to get it from his location to the national park. So while we were there today, we were also able to hear a little bit of the updates about this amazing case and amazing story. The chimpanzee is being taken care of 24/7 and slowly growing. So it's it's honestly a beautiful story and very impactful story in my opinion. And I feel like this just goes to show the unplanned nature of conservation and animal welfare, and the fact that being able to stay prepared, stay ready, and be willing to switch up your plans because that's what's needed in the moment is so important when it comes to improving situations like this. Because if he wasn't ready, he wouldn't have been able to help out. But needless to say, it was very beneficial and a very amazing story. Then one of the big conversations that we kept on having multiple times over and over again was a conversation about habituation. And habituation is essentially the desensitization process for animals in response to humans. In gorillas, this process usually takes like 6 to 7 years, I believe. 6, 7. But halfway through is the most dangerous because the animals lose their fear and wild response to humans where in the wild they usually try and steer clear of us. But when they get to that point where they're starting to get habituated, they'll be a little bit more aggressive because if you don't provide them with the food that you're using to try and habituate them or doing the things that you're doing as you would when they're explicitly in their habituation program, they aren't really scared of us anymore. So they'll do whatever they feel necessary to do. And one of the crazy phenomenon that's been seen by different local people as well as different vets and workers at the national parks is that the different groups of gorillas, that are habituated, they'll actually move a bit closer to us if they're being encroached upon by a wild group of gorillas because they know that the wild ones are actually still scared of us, but they know that they're not and we're not going to harm them. So it's a very interesting dynamic, but of course, safety does come into question with all these interesting social dynamics. But nonetheless, everything that I saw today truly fits into Gabon being referred to as one of the last Edens. From being able to go from the rainforest to the savannah to the coast, being able to see crocodiles, hogs, elephants, hippos, buffaloes all in the same area, all thriving and coexisting in such a natural way is something that you can't quite put into words or quantify. I really try and put it into words every time I show pictures or videos or even just talk about my experience, but it's genuinely so hard to do because there's no place like Gabon. And that's why after today, my total understanding of conservation shifted even beyond what I had originally thought of it as. But also because it tied in a way to a sort of humility. The fact that we need to be able to express that emotion and experience humility in order to be proper stewards of conservation, not only for us as people, but also for the animals, the plants, as well as the complex history of the land's past, present, and future.